Political Value System. In this chapter, we will deal with the setting up of institutions which would formulate rules to organize a society or government. B. Procedure for election of people for such institutions. C. A procedure for evolving the law. The Quran offers clear guidance regarding the selection of people for these tasks. Surely, Allah commands you to make over the administration of affairs of state to those worthy of such a task. 458. Merit alone is, therefore, the criteria for such appointments. Affairs of state are to be conducted in consultation among themselves. 42:38. Make this further clear that there are no hereditary or arbitrary appointments. Legislators and administrators at all levels are to be elected by the people themselves. As far as judging on merit is concerned, the Quran describes characteristic of a mu'min, a firm believer in limits of Allah, in great details. These will be set out in a separate chapter. Muslims must measure candidates for office at all levels against Quranic description and make a selection of the best candidates. The elected, those entrusted with the affairs of state, are, in turn, asked to enact legislation or administrative procedures in consultation with the people as enjoined in 42:38 in the paragraph above. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, himself set a brilliant precedent in this sphere by consulting his people in all important affairs. And consult them in formulation and enforcement of matters of state. 3:159. The Quran does not give the details for the form of such consultative institutions. It is for the Muslims themselves to evolve such institutions for themselves to suit their times and space so long as the principle of consultation is not lost sight of at any level. Limits of Allah are clearly defined in the Quran, but difference might well arise on smaller matters of detail when legislations is under discussion. At whatever level such differences arise, the final arbiter should be the elected chief executive of the Islamic State. But, no, by the Lord, Rab, they believe not until they make you a judge of what is in dispute between them and then find not any straightness in their hearts regarding your decision. 465. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as chief executive, would, of course, make his final judgment in the light of what he would understand as a divine injunction. Later chief executives would certainly follow in the footsteps of the Holy Prophet and ensure that their arbitration would be according to their understanding of the limits of Allah. And, in whatever you differ, the final judgment thereof is with Allah. 42:10. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the chief executives, who follow him, would represent Allah in such a situation. It will be noticed that great stress has been laid upon the necessity of consultation among people whenever deciding upon matters of common interest. Institutions would, of course, be set up according to requirements of times. Local councils, district councils, provincial and federal parliaments would all be a part of general machinery of consultative procedure. The Quran, deliberately, does not go into the details of such organizations but does talk extensively of the principles governing consultative assemblies. Two very important pillars in this respect are the institution of Salat, Muslims' regular prayer, and Hajj, pilgrimage to Mecca. I will discuss these institutions in greater detail later. Here only a brief introduction should suffice. Muslims all over the world assemble in their respective organizations at stated times to discuss problems facing them and find solutions. Salat indeed has been enjoined on the believers at specified timings. 4:103. The primary aim of congregational prayer is for the Muslims to assemble for a particular mission. Frequency and exact timings of such gatherings have not been given in the Quran because these would depend on requirements of times and places. Such meetings may be daily, weekly, monthly, and so on or on as required basis. I may mention in passing that the Muslims have done injustice to the Quran by restricting to prayers alone. Salat has political, economic, social, and other implications. In fact, it regulates all spheres of individual and collective lives of Muslims and enjoins them to follow the laws of God at all times. The fact that the primary aim of congregations was consultations among themselves is borne out by verse 42:38 in the Quran. And who assemble for Salat and their affairs are decided by counsel among themselves. 42:38. The day of assembly is further described in chapter 62 of the Quran. When the call is sounded for Salat on the day of assembly, hasten to the remembrance of Allah and leave off other business. That is better for you, if you know. But when the salat is over, disperse abroad in the land and seek of Allah's grace. 62:9-10. There is a particular point that the Quran has stressed in connection with attendance in such congregations. Go not near these assemblies when you are intoxicated. You must know exactly what you are talking about before you attend them. 443. Important matters are being discussed in these gatherings, and it is important that people attending these sessions must be in full possession of their senses. This is another indication that salat is not a mere ritual. So much for assemblies at country and national levels. The Quran has suggested international gatherings of delegates of Muslims from all countries of the world at pre-arranged times and places so that leaders of Islam can agree upon Islam's response to international problems. Traditionally, Hajj has been an annual assembly and Umrah are occasional assemblies as required. Unfortunately, Hajj has been translated as pilgrimage, restricted to some ritual procedures and enjoined as a personal act of worship for individuals. I will not discuss these aspects here because we are talking about the primary aim of these international assemblies. A discussion of Hajj in great details follows in a separate chapter. The importance of such international gatherings is fully realized in modern times when scheduled meetings of the United Nations Organization take place every year to plan for peace and prosperity of the globe. New York as a headquarters of such an organization has only recently come about, but Mecca as a venue of international Muslim delegates assembly every year has been functioning for centuries. What is required for the Organization of Islamic Countries to hold their annual sessions in Mecca at international level? They must make their rules of procedures for modern times, but must remember to include the few details mentioned in the Quran. A continuing tradition is a great binding force. The central organization would set up many smaller organizations based in different parts of the Islamic world who would hold their conferences or seminars etc. at specified times and places. Umrah. Elected representatives at all levels must know that whenever they are legislating or making administrative plans, they must conform completely with Islamic higher values. Join the fold of Islam in toto. Do not get your guidance from your personal inclinations. 2:208. They must subordinate their own good to the good of fellow beings as enjoined by God. The ultimate sovereignty must rest in the Quran. And whoever judges not by what Allah has revealed, those are the disbelievers. 544. Also in 545, they are mentioned as, those are the wrongdoers. Some other nations may seem to be doing well while disobeying the laws of Allah. But that will only be for a short while. The consequences of their wrongdoing will soon be transparent. Illicit then the judgment of ignorance that they desire? And who is better than Allah to judge for a people who have a firm belief? 550. It would require courage on the part of legislators when they are asked to suppress their personal desires when legislating. They must not deviate from their main path, a total allegiance to Allah and His Prophet, howsoever much a following of other courses of action may benefit them personally. Be not unfaithful to Allah and the Messenger nor unfaithful to your trusts. 827. When politicians in an Islamic state legislate in accordance with the wishes of Allah and also administer the affairs of state likewise, they will emerge as a major power in the comity of nations. Allah has promised to those of you who believe and do good that He will surely make them rulers in the earth as He made people like you before. He will establish for them their way of life, which He has chosen for them. 2400 hours 55. They not only have the responsibility to ensure peace and prosperity in their own countries but also to help other struggling nations where justice is not being meted out to humanity. In such circumstances, they must ensure that they remain strictly objective in the course of providing assistance and not maneuver a situation to their own advantage. And we have made you an exalted nation, equidistant from all other nations, keeping an eye on them for assistance to them, while you yourselves must know that God and Prophet keeps an eye over you, ensuring that you do not violate rules of decency. 2:143. We have already talked of an organization of Islamic countries when discussing Hajj. Here, the founding of a United Nations organization is being hinted at. The more powerful and affluent nations of the world must make it a point to help developing nations to achieve their potential. If ever there is tension or war among nations, these exalted counties must intervene and ensure that human rights are not suppressed. And if two parties of the believers quarrel, make peace between them. Then, if one of them does wrong to the other, fight that which does wrong till it returns to Allah's command, then when it returns make peace between them with justice and act equitably. 49:9. In international affairs, peaceful coexistence is very strongly enjoined in the Quran. Muslims must never force their view on other people when it comes to adoption of a way of life. There is no compulsion in adoption of way of live. 2:256. Say, O those of you who do not believe in the institution of divine permanent value system, I do not follow your ideology and you do not follow the value system I believe in. It appears that after a lot of thought and discussion, I am not likely to come over to your way of life, nor are you likely to be persuaded to adopt mine. You are welcome to your belief, allow me to stick to my value system. Let there be a peaceful coexistence. 109:1-6. In fact, when people of the world as a whole differ considerably in the way they think matters facing the world should be decided, they would be well advised to try and find a minimum common ground for peaceful resolution of issues. Let the differences not be emphasized. Start to work together with the values system they share. Say, O people who believe in rule of law, Ahlul Kitab, come let us find what we have in common in the sphere of a value system. Kalamat 364. The UNO is trying to perform exactly this function in the formulation of a common approach to solve worldwide problems in an agreed way. Adoption of an international charter of fundamental, basic human rights is on one step in this direction. Success has been achieved in other spheres also, and we must hope that people all over the world with different ideologies will all contribute to a minimum agreed upon program and expand it in time. Politics is the art of the possible. People will differ how they view problems in hand. They will also have different views on how to solve such problems. So long as these differences are in good faith and the aim on each side is the promotion of the best interests of a society, such differences must be taken in their stride. There should be no lasting enmities over honest differences of opinion. The Muslims are asked to hold fast to the divine value system and not have several different versions of a clearly defined guidance. Remaining within these limits of Allah, Muslims will differ in formulation of detailed legislation to suit their particular society in their times. This honest difference should not lead to enmity and the evolvement of a separate entity by each group. And hold fast by the covenant of Allah, Hablillah, all together and be not disunited. And, remember Allah's favor to you when you were enemies, then He united your hearts so by His favor you became brethrens. And, you were on the brink of a pit of fire, then He saved you from it. 3:103. The legislators must not have a Sunni, Shia, Hanafi, Shafi'i, or Deobandi etc. approach. That will only create enmities. Legislators must refer only to the Quran when arriving at a consensus. Only thus they have a chance of remaining united. As for those who split up on the evolvement of their way of life and became sects, following personalities, you have nothing in common with them. 6:159. Differences on minor matters must be resolved by an agreed upon procedure. Detailed legislation will have to change with changing times, and those who have frozen positions on such matters, ostensibly in following in the footsteps of personalities other than Allah, are not contributing towards creation of a united stand by the people. If they insist on creating schism, consequences will follow. And, obey Allah and His Apostle and dispute not with each other lest you become weak-hearted and your power departs. 846. Basic structure of an economic system. The Quran offers very fundamental suggestions for a foundations of an economic system. As usual, the Quran only offers a structure. Details would have to be filled in by Muslims of any time and space to suit their requirements. The broad principles are as follows. A. Land is the basic productive unit. It contains all the ingredients necessary for nourishment of humanity. B. It must be owned collectively to produce maximum results. C. Only work should result in wages. Capital must not produce money. D. Having earned an income with hard work, a man should use as much of it as he needs to fulfill his basic requirements. Any surplus should be kept available for collective use by humanity. We shall start of this discussion with a consideration of al-ard, the term used by the Quran for land and all its potentials. And certainly we established you in the earth and made therein means of livelihood for you. You do not seem to be deriving full benefit from it, Tashkarun. 7:10. There are immense means of sustenance stored on and under the earth, a free gift from Allah. All that what man has to do is to discover these resources and grow them for use by humanity. He it is who made the earth subservient to you, so go about in the spacious sides thereof and eat of his sustenance. 67:15. And the earth we have spread it out and made with firm mounts and caused to grow in it of every suitable thing. And we have made in it means of subsistence for you and for him for whom you provide not. And there is not a thing but with us are the treasures of it, and we send it not down but in a known measure. 15:19-21. Sending in known measures is entirely dependent on the will of man. Whatever he determines as his requirement, he will not find his Rabb, God, wanting in providing it, because Quran says, there is no living being on earth for which Allah does not have a responsibility to provide means for its sustenance. Allah knows requirements of living beings at all stages of life. It is all on record. 11:6. The point is clearly made that the basic essentials from which consumer goods are made by man for sustenance of life are available in plenty in the universe. On behalf of Allah, man has to work hard and constantly to convert these basic essentials in required quantity so that no living being is deprived of its basic needs. And see to it that you do not deprive your children of nourishment because you fear you will become destitute. The provision of means of sustenance for you and your children is Allah's responsibility. 17:31. And the same theme is emphasized in verse 6:152. The earth contains a tremendous quantity of resources necessary for sustenance of human and animal life. This free gift of Allah is inexhaustible. Men, as Allah's soldiers on earth, must discover these resources, convert them into usable form and guarantee their provision to every living being so that life continues on earth. So that men are enabled to fulfill this mission, Allah recommends that land, or for that matter all means of productions, should remain in collective custody. And Allah's is the heritage of the heavens and the earth. 3:180. The first implication of earth being Allah's heritage is that it must remain in God's possession and not be parceled out on an ownership basis to humans. The second and a very important implication is that it must be used on behalf of Allah only by such institutions who guarantee that its product will be used for the good of entire humanity in an equitable manner, thus ensuring that no living being is deprived of means of nourishment. And we have made the earth, means of all production, for the collective use of entire humanity. 55:10. That the earth and whatever is in it belongs to Allah and not to individuals is again referred to in verses 19:40 and 57:10. Verily, to us belongs the earth and whatever is on and under it. And it is, in the final analysis, our laws which determine consequences of human action. 19:40. And what has come over you that you do not make available to entire humanity whatever treasures of nourishment there are in the heavens and on earth, which are Allah's heritage. 57:10. So far, it is clear that according to the Quran, land and other means of production are owned by Allah, that is collectively and not individually owned. As to how land should be administered so that maximum benefit should accrue to humanity, much of this arrangement has been left to the discretion of mankind. As time goes by, people in different countries will evolve different methods to maximize production and its equitable distribution. A few broad principles are, however, offered by the Quran with regard to this. In verse 79:30-34, Quran describes various stages of evolution at the end of which land emerged as a source of production of means of nourishment for humans and animals. And the earth was cast away from the nebula. He brought forth from it its water and its pastures. And the mountains, he made them firm and then enabled the earth to be a provision of sustenance for you and your animals. 79:30-33. This theme is further explained. Then, let man look at his food. How we pour down abundant water. Then, cleave the earth, cleaving it asunder. Then, cause the grain to grow therein, and grapes and clover, and the olive and the palm, and thick gardens, and fruits and herbage. All provisions of nourishment for you and your cattle. 80:24-32. It will be noticed that in man's efforts to make land a useful means of production, nature provides to him a lot of free and vital help without which production would not be possible. Hence, the distribution and management of this free gift of Allah should be in such a manner that it should be available to all those who need it in an equitable manner. For this purpose, He made mountains on earth, for water system, and provided in it a potential for production of means of sustenance in 4 seasons, all this so that land should remain available to all needy persons for fulfillment of their needs. 41:10. Society must decide as to who are in need and are capable of handling it best. Such people should keep managing it for as long as the collective will of the people so desires. Verily earth belongs to Allah and He hands out its management to whomsoever He considers fit. 7:128. Land is a free gift of Allah. From it are produced a variety of foods for sustenance of mankind in the process of production. Allah provides free help in abundance. Without this help, production would not be possible. So, Allah and man are partners in the process of production. Both deserve to be compensated for their effort. Man is asked to keep his fair share of production as a reward for his effort. As far as Allah's share is concerned, He asks that it be given to those who are temporarily incapable of making their own living. This way, both parties will get their fair share. All this is beautifully described in a poetic passage of the Quran. See what you sow? Is it you that cause it to grow, or are we the causer of growth? If we pleased, we would make it chaff, then would you lament, surely, we are burdened with debt, nay, we are deprived. See you the water which you drink, and which is essential for your crops, do you bring it down from the clouds, or are we the bringer? If we pleased, we could make it saltish, why give you not thanks? See you the fire which you kindle? Or the heat provided by the sun for your crops? Is it you that produce the trees for it, or are we the producer? Now think deeply about this production process and remember that whatever is surplus to your requirements is a means of sustenance for those who are temporarily deprived. 56:63-73. In order to fulfill their basic needs, human beings required income. What is legitimate income? The Quran gives a clear guidance. And that man can have nothing but what he strives for, and that his striving will soon be seen. He will be rewarded for it with the fullest reward. 53:39-41. Income, then, is a compensation for labor where results are demonstrable, in other words, productive labor. The Quran does not recognize as legitimate that income which is not as a result of labor. Unearned income, out of capital only, is termed as usury, riba, by the Quran, and it is strictly prohibited. Oh, you who believe, do not acquire unearned income. You think it increases you wealth. It is not true. In fact, it decreases it. 3:130. When you make money from investment in stocks and bonds, rentals from your property, a return on absentee landlordship or games of chance, you seem to be adding to your personal wealth. But because, as a result of this income to you, no productive goods have been added into national resources, such money will only add to inflation, which will hurt not only yourself but also other more productive workers whose hard work has added more usable goods in the market. When people insist on continuing to live in a society where mere money, not allied with hard work and productive labor, makes more money, such a society becomes unbalanced, resulting in lawlessness and disorder. A proper course would be to support the hard workers and give them such wages as would ensure for them a decent way of life. The Quran terms this a friendly help, sadaqah, as opposed to riba. Only such a course of action would ensure the development of the society as a whole and ensure a peaceful and comfortable life for all when sadaqah is encouraged and riba is not. As for those who insist on acquiring unearned income, out of capital only, for themselves, they are like people bitten by a snake. Like mad people, they run hither and thither. Greed for making more and more unearned money results in this state of mind. They argue that they are involved in honest trading. But they should know that God allows making money with productive labor and prohibits unearned income. To those who pay attention to divine advice and refrain from acquiring unearned income, the past is past. They do pay for their past failing but ensure future peace. If, on the other hand, they insist on continuing with their nefarious activity, there is disaster for them. It is a law of nature that societies based on unearned income perish and people who support a system in which productive labor alone is allowed to prosper. 2:275-276. According to the Quran, if an individual or a set of people following a wrong path wish to adopt a correct course of action, all they have to do is to retrieve their steps, come back to the place from where they went to the wrong path, Tawbah, and then embark upon the correct path, Amal Salih. If a people living in a system where unearned income is encouraged, wish to avoid further consequential disaster, they must get rid of this system, resort to Tawbah, and instead adopt a policy where honest, hard, productive work provides a decent way of life. O believers, get rid of your old system of acquiring unearned income if you wish to avoid the consequences of adoption of an unjust course of action. But if you insist on keeping to this path, then be ready for war against God and His apostle. This is what riba will result in. On the other hand, if you retrace your steps, you can at least get back your original sum, without addition of unearned amounts. Neither should you exploit others nor allow yourself to be exploited by others. If and when you feel that the man owing you your original sum has a liquidity problem, allow him installments for a mutually fixed period of time. Better still, if you can afford to forget about this original sum also if circumstances so require, it is good for both of you. 2:278-280. These are the steps recommended by the Quran when people decide to adopt a just system. It would, understandably, be gradual change if people feel that an abrupt adoption of an ideal system would result in extreme hardships. Developed nations are working towards a zero rate of interest. Those with a relatively lower rate of interest, and hence lesser unearned income, have already seen that their economics improve as a result. Inflation is much lesser in countries with a lower rate of interest, and if such rates are further reduced, inflation will hopefully be nearly eliminated. In a decent society, this will be an incentive for the people not to resort to acquiring unearned income by various methods. War against God and Prophet will cease. People will observe for themselves that when you think that you increase your wealth by resorting to unearned income, it is not in fact so. But when you support people who earn money with honest, hard, productive labor, you add to national wealth. 30:39. The Quran does not suggest laying any limits on income that a man or woman can make provided it is done through honest, productive hard work. The question arises as to how much of his income a man keeps for his own use and what proportion he makes available to the society for collective use to promote common good. The Quran suggests the establishment of a zakat system by the state according to which the state takes over certain responsibilities for fulfilling the basic needs of individuals while the individual, in turn, provides the resources for building an infrastructure through which people's needs are taken care of. For this purpose, the state and the individual enter into a solemn agreement. According to this agreement, Allah, the state functioning according to the dictates of the Quran, buys from the believers their lives and their belongings and gives to believers in lieu a life in Jannat, a state of society in which there is guarantee for food, clothing, accommodation and other basic needs of individuals. Individuals work hard for the establishment of such a society and if necessary, fight for their right to do so. Such an agreement as is being entered into with believers in Quran has before been entered into with believers in the Bible and Torah. Those of you who live by the provisions of this solemn agreement, let them rejoice over their bargain. Let them remain content that Allah will honor His part of the agreements. It is a great accomplishment for the believers. 9:111. The state must guarantee fulfillments of all nourishment needs of an individual when he enters into such an agreement. Surely, it is guaranteed to you that you are not hungry nor naked, and that you are not thirsty therein and exposed to the sun's heat. 20:118-119. In practical life, the state and the individual have to agree on what part of an individual's belongings are to be acquired for collective use. The Quran gives a broad guidance. They ask you as to how much of our belongings you ask of us to keep available for collective use. Tell them, whatever is surplus to your genuine requirements for leading a good, peaceful life. 2:219. In another passage, the Quran mentions some of the people for whom the Muslims should keep their surplus income available. They ask you about the disposal of their surplus belongings. Tell them that you should keep these available for use by your needy children, parents, others near and dear to you, those who have been left without economic support, those whose business has come to a halt and those who have been forced to take refuge. 2:215. The Muslims stuck to this kind of an arrangement for a number of years in their early history. It resulted in peace and prosperity for themselves as well as enlightenment and a good life for a large number of people in the world wherever this message was acted upon. The division of taxes in two segments, that is a secular tax and religious tax, the latter fixed at 2.5% of annual savings, has not sanction in the Quran. This system seems to have been introduced by autocratic rulers for their convenience with help from some misguided religious scholars. Whereas individuals keep their entire savings at the disposal of society for use on collective good, the state has to acquire only a worked-out sum to undertake its duties. Such duties include maintenance of law and order, provision of communications, educations, health, and such like facilities. The Quran mentions following sources of state income. A. Zakat. This is the sum paid to the people at a rate worked out by the state for fulfilling its duties to achieve collective prosperity. The Quran lays great stress on this and repeatedly asks the people to participate in this program to undertake nourishment and growth of society in all spheres of activity. B. Sadaqat. Whereas zakat could take care of expenses under normal circumstances, there may be abnormal and unplanned occasions for which the state has not catered in its plans. Voluntary subscriptions or additional levies are termed as sadaqat and are meant to cover such emergencies. 960. Such voluntary subscriptions or emergently imposed levies are for use by 1. Such people who, for some genuine reason, are not capable of earning for themselves. 2. People who were running a business or earning a living but are temporarily deprived due to some emergency. 3. People employed on collection of such revenues. 4. For such people who would like to join the ranks of believers but are prevented from doing so for some economic reasons. 5. To achieve freedom for such people who are denied human rights. 6. To alleviate the debt burden of such people who have come to this state of indebtedness for no fault of their own. 7. People seeking refuge from exploiters. 8. And generally for promoting the good of humanity in any way thought fit by the state. 960. In ideal circumstances, such emergencies should not take place. But sometimes they will. The state should not be found wanting in these circumstances. Anful any income that accrues to the state in addition to its fixed levies. Such income in its entirety is used by the state. They ask you regarding income which accrues to the state in addition to what it is planned for as a fixed or emergency levy. Tell them that the entire such income goes to the state treasury, to be utilized as per guidance of Allah and Rasul. 8:1. D. Ganima. All reparations received from those who have imposed a war on the believers. 1/5 of such income goes straight into government treasury. And keep in mind that from whatever you acquire on the battlefield, 1/5 goes to the state treasury for general administration and the rest of it is used by the state to cater to the needs of war-affected people like relatives of war casualties, those left without support as a result of war and those whose business is affected by war etc. 841. It was customary for the Arabs to go to war because they were allowed to keep for themselves whatever they snatched from their enemies as a result of war. The Quran stopped this custom because there is no provision for a war for profit in an Islamic state. This has also been discussed in more detail in the chapter relating to war and peace. Fay. This is an income from the enemy or from other sources which accrues not as a result of war. During these expeditions, whatever properties come your way for which no warlike action is required to be taken, these goes entirely at the disposal of the state, as explained earlier. According to state discretion, these should be distributed among soldiers, their near and dear one, those left without economic support, those whose business comes to a halt due to no fault of their own, those rendered without refuge and those who were forced to migrate because their homes and properties were forcibly taken away from them. To whomsoever the state gives these resources at her discretion, it must be ensured that they do not keep circulating amongst the richer people in your society. 59:6-8. The cardinal point made here is that government revenues are meant for alleviation of distress among the needy. They should be assisted so that they become economically self-sufficient again and thus become a productive member of the community. Capital must not be allowed to keep circulating among the more prosperous members of the society. On the other hand, the latter should part with some of their comforts to rehabilitate the former. This has also been discussed in chapter relating to war and peace. With change in times, other means of income will accrue to the state. The principle given by the Quran is that such incomes are not spent for personal needs of individuals but for the common good of humanity. In a state where principles of an economic system as suggested by the Quran have been adopted, there is no incentive for individuals to accumulate wealth for themselves. In return for putting in hard, productive labor, society is obliged to provide the workers their basic needs for leading a decent life. They cannot own any immovable property, anyway, because the system does not allow ownership of land by individuals. For a normal society, it will take a long period of time to change over its system to an arrangement suggested by the Quran. The Quran understands this and suggests legislation for a gradual, orderly, and peaceful evolution. If, while a society is in the process of an evolution, some people do possess property, the Quran asks them to make a will so that, in their own judgment, resources left by them after their death are reserved for use by such people who have a more urgent need for them than others. If you are leaving any property after your death, it is incumbent upon you to make out a will before your death in the name of your parents, children, and other members close to you according to law. It is emphasized that you must do so. 2:180. It may be mentioned in passing that such a will must be witnessed by at least two people, 5:106, and can be questioned in a court of law if judged to be unjust, 2:182. O you believers, call to witness between you, when death draws nigh to one of you, at the time of making the will, two just person among you, 5:106. But if one fears a wrong or a sinful course on the part of the testator, and affects an agreement between the parties, there is no blame on him. 2:182. If after the provisions of a will by the deceased have been complied with and his other liabilities squared off, there is still some property left over, then it is to be distributed according to a formula suggested by the Quran. Allah enjoins you concerning your family, for the male is the equal of the portion of two females, but if there be more than two females, 2/3 of which the deceased leaves is theirs. And if there be one, for her is the half. And as for his parents, for each of them is the sixth of what he leaves, if he has a child, but if he has no child and only his two parents inherit him, for his mother is the third, but if he has brothers, for the mother is the sixth, after squaring off a will by the deceased and any liabilities that he owes, for 11. And yours is half of what your wives leave if they have no child, but if they have a child, your share is a fourth of what they leave after payment of deceased's will or liabilities. And theirs is the fourth of what you leave if you have no child, but if you have a child, their share is the eighth of what you leave after payment of your will or liabilities. And if a man or a woman, having no children, leaves property to be inherited and he, or she, has a brother or a sister, then for each of them is the sixth, but if they are more than that, they shall be sharers in the third after payment of the will made by the deceased or any loan owned by him or her. This is an ordinance from Allah. 4:12. There are one or two more places where distribution of property is mentioned, but it must be noted that all this is if the deceased leaves any property. As can be noted from the above quotations from the Quran, shares accrue only after any debts owed by the deceased are paid off and the provisions of a will made by him have been complied with. Whereas successive Muslim administrations have the right to fill in any gaps that might appear in time by fresh legislation, they are not authorized to make any alterations whatsoever in divine injunctions. For instance, a general belief that a will can be made only in respect of 1/3 of the property being left behind by the deceased, or that a will cannot be made in favor of a certain category of people, has no mention in the Quran. On the other hand, it is a clear violation of a divine injunction. For smooth running of administration and economic activity in communities, people have to be assigned for various kinds of jobs. Some jobs require skill. Others require more of muscle. Some are desk jobs, or technical or non-technical nature. Others are outdoor jobs which require running about. All such categories of people are interdependent on each other. All economic activity requires their collective effort for useful production. Some have to work in a position subordinate to others so that work proceeds smoothly with discipline. Do they think they distribute capabilities of production amongst people? No, it is we who have given different earning capacities to different people. In this process, some people have higher ranks than others, some are made subordinate to others, for efficient production. 43:32. But this should not mean that people with better earning capacity should appropriate to themselves a major part of what they produce collectively. After all, a superior earning capacity is a gift of God, bestowed for a purpose. It is true that some amongst you have a higher earning capacity than others. This is God's gift. Why do these people with a higher earning capacity not understand that they must part with their surplus and let their subordinates, with lower earning capacity, have it so that they can all be equal sharers in the bounties of God? Do they question the fact that their higher capacity is a gift of God? 1671. Dignity of labor is here stressed, and their right to earn a decent living is highlighted, notwithstanding their being blue-collar. All human beings are born equal and are entitled to a dignified and graceful living whatever their status in life. God has defined value system concerning an economic system in fair detail. But there is one cardinal point on which it lays the greatest stress, repeated in passage after passage. And that point is to urge human beings to willingly give their belongings and endeavor for maintaining a healthy balance in the universe. Let us recall the solemn agreement between God and man in verse 9:111 mentioned earlier. The man gives his entire belongings and his life, if necessary, for bringing about peace and prosperity in the universe. This would be possible only if a man was to seek guidance from God, left to himself. A man wants to live for himself and denies to others the fruits of his labor, thus showing ungratefulness to God. 100:6. For living an affluent life, independent of others in the society, he is tempted to accumulate wealth. He has a very great longing for accumulating wealth. 100:8. But he does not foresee that such accumulation of wealth is of no use to him when the chips are down. Unbalanced distribution of income creates major disturbance in societies, and it is the wealthier ones who come to major harm. And those who hoard up gold and silver and do not keep it available for people as suggested by God, announce to them a painful chastisement on the day when their accumulated gold and silver will be heated in the fire of hell, in this world in the first instance, then their foreheads and their sides and their backs will be branded with it. This is what you hoarded up for yourself, so taste what you used to hoard. 9:34-35. They will want to know what brought them to this end. They will realize it for themselves. What is it that dragged you in this hellish state of affairs? They will say it is because we did not follow the path suggested by God. We did not help with our resources those whose business had come to a standstill. 74:42-44. If they were following the path of God, not only would they have personally helped with their resources those who were in need, but also would have urged their class of people to cooperate in this noble cause. On the day of reckoning, my wealth has not helped me. My authority, which I had due to my wealth, has gone from me. 69:28-29. Because. Nor did he urge himself or his ilk to divert their resources towards the needy. 69:34. At a time when the society was in a state of imbalance, they failed to honor their agreement with God and did not make available their resources for restoration of balance. Oh, you who believe, make available from what we have given you before the day comes when there is no bargaining. You will not be able to pay out of your trouble, nor friendship. Your friends will desert you, and nobody will stand up for you to help you. 2:256. If these wealthy people think that on the day of reckoning, their acts of worship and apparent following of dogmas will be a substitute for the real noble act that is the diversion of their resources for help to the needy, they are wrong. It is not righteousness that you turn your faces towards the east and the west, but righteousness is to give away your wealth in the cause of God, to give of your resources to your near and dear ones, the orphans, the needy, the wayfarer, the ones asking for assistance to stand back on their feet and to set slaves free. 2:177. In fact, you get nowhere near the path of righteousness unless you make available your accumulated resources which you love so dearly for restoration of prosperity in society. Never ever can you come near the path of righteousness until and unless you make available the wealth you so dearly love for the common good. 3 hours 91 minutes. These accumulated resources do not belong entirely to those who think that they have single-handedly earned them. Many a people who participated in the production of these resources have been deprived of their needs on account of natural or man-made disasters. It is the right of those deprived that these resources be restored to them. The wealthy man who continues to accumulate wealth and keeps his purse tied, 70:18, should know that in their accumulated wealth, the ones who have been reduced to a state that they have to ask for fulfillment of their basic needs, and those who have been deprived of their possessions, have a right that they can demand. 70:24-25. Notice that in the Quranic way of life, people reduced to a state of poverty are not begging. It is, on the other hand, their right to live a decent life and economic security, and the well-off are asked, in their own interest, to part with a part of their wealth to restore balance in society. Those who are niggardly and bid people to be niggardly and hide that which Allah has given them out of His grace, for them we have prepared an abasing chastisement, for 37. And what harm would it do them if they believe in Allah and the day of reckoning and keep available part of the wealth given to them? 439. It would certainly do them no harm. On the other hand, if they continue to excel with each other in accumulating wealth and denying it to those in need, they will live a miserable life. The race for excelling each other in accumulating wealth prevents you from determining the true aim in your life. Once in this mad race, you will continue in it till death. If you but halted a moment and deliberated about the consequences of this mad rush, you would surely realize that it is leading you towards disastrous results. It appears that rather than deliberating, you will continue with your mad race until you get to hell, and then you will be asked, why did you not keep available resources given to you which you kept hidden and unused for the good of humanity? But then it will be too late. 102:1-8. The Prophet is asked to give them a timely warning. Eventual destruction and disaster is written for a person who keeps accumulating wealth and keeps counting it day and night in order to increase it. Instead of realizing this for himself, he keeps criticizing those who warn him of such consequences. In fact, he sometimes calls them bad names. He thinks that this accumulated wealth will last him till kingdom come. No, it is not like this at all. In fact, he is gradually drifting towards hell. And what is this hell? This is his greed for money, which is like fire burning in his heart, which gradually consumes him. 104:1-7. Such, then, are the dire consequences of not abiding by the solemn agreement with God in which man had pledged his belongings and, when necessary, his life, for creating a peaceful and prosperous world. On the other hand, for those who abide by this agreement, a much more meaningful and prosperous life is assured. And as for the man, who gives from his own resources for growth of humanity and voluntarily goes on giving to restore balance to a society, rent by classes, this man travels through life and achieves his potential with ease. 92:5-7. The one who gives, when necessary, whatever he owns for the growth of humanity and does not consider that he is obliging the persons for whom he is giving, and his giving is solely for compliance with the solemn agreement he contracted with his God, his noble effort will result in his total happiness. 92:18-21. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is urged to do the same. O Prophet, look back on your own life. Were you not left helpless and alone and God provided you security? Were you not looking for guidance and God provided it to you through revelation? And were you not in need when God gave you so much that you were not dependent on anybody? So, now that you are in a position to help, do not turn away from a man who is left alone and helpless. If somebody is asking for help, do not leave him high and dry. God has provided you with resources. Keep them available to all. 93:6-11. History is witness to the fact that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did set up an economic system in which he demonstrably restrained himself from appropriating state resources to himself and his family. On the other hand, he set up a brilliant example by leading a hard and simple life himself so that he could divert state's resources towards those in need, that is, those who are left alone and helpless despite being amongst crowds of people, 90:15. And destitute who are reduced to dust so that they could earn only a meager living, not enough for their basic needs. 90:16. A society based on such a just economic system prosper as long as it helps to extricate a large number of people and nations out of darkness.